Hey folks. Yeah, we got another one. We're gonna call this my fourth catastrophic handlebar failure, and my fifth handlebar failure. One was catastrophic, but I didn't crash. I felt that right before it happened, and saved myself from dying, essentially. This one I actually did feel beforehand. I noticed something wrong in the bars and the way they feel, and I have to get better at trusting my judgment. The last time this happened, I trusted my judgment and it paid off. The problem with this one, I was at Tamarancho. I was on Wagon Wheel, but I had been running from some guys that were doing their after work ride, and I wanted to stay in front of them. So I was putting down the heat, or as best, or the candle power that I have to do the work to stay in front. And right in the section between the crest of the Little Ass Kicker Hill and the beginning of the real rock garden, my bar snapped. I felt it beforehand. I knew something was, I felt like there was something weird, and I didn't stop to check, which I usually would do. But this is a very odd failure. Well, no, it's not an odd failure. I take that back. There's a lot of things going on here that I think are very interesting, and that's why I'm making this video, is because I think it gets into, this development process and what goes into it, and what I'm learning as I go through all this. And you could argue, if I'm having this many handlebar failures, I think it's a record. I don't know anybody that's had as many with them riding, but there's a lot to learn. Now, in each one of them, the failure was different. So you could say, had a failure, corrected the problem, moved forward. Found a new problem, corrected the problem, moved forward. And so we're not repeating failures here, which is good, because that would be some serious stupidity, right? This is the picture of the bar. We can see that broken at Wagon Wheel. Let's take a look closer at it. We can look here. Oh, why is it doing that? It's opening up on the wrong screen. All right, there we go. So we'll have to do it this way. So there's some shots of the broken end. We've got a few things we can talk about here. Oh, wounds. I was pretty gashed up. All right, so we're going to talk about some microscope images in a minute, but let me hide that. And we'll get into this. But I wanted to talk about the interesting thing when we're working on bike development that I've found. Now, I've had downhill bikes, I've had big enduro bikes, I've had little squishy trail bikes, I've had hardtails, I've had long travel hardtails, and I've had clunkers and all-road bikes and all that stuff, all different kinds of bikes. What I've learned is that the rigid bikes tell you more in development than anything else. Not only do we notice geometry changes and what effects they have, like on the steering system, it's very noticeable when things change. If you're on a long travel bike, it's really hard to notice that stuff. But what's interesting is how many failures actually happen in the rigid space. Let's go back a bit further. Here's a top tube failure that happened on the Supermarine Spitfire, where, you can argue I'm not the best welder in the world, and there was a reason why that failed from a welding point of view or something like that. I use 10 on mountain bikes, 1 1/8 top tube. And and they get pretty long. And in this case, I was forced to use a straight gauge tube of 035 or something to make this bike work out. And uh, you can see that just to get the tube together, I had to make this crazy thing in the repair process. Um, and there's that bike. It's looking a little stretched out there, but we had to do some crazy things. But what that led to was the top tube that I use now, and you can see it's got a 1.2 millimeter end there, and they're long enough that I can do most of the bikes that I do. That was because of rigid bikes, because I'm using this tiny head tube, and I get this failure, and it's like, well, it's telling me something. We need to change the top tube. Haven't had an incident at all since. It's been awesome. The broken handlebars, the first ones were on the Supermarine Spitfire. And that was an interesting one, the clunker platform. You could argue that the only handlebar I've had that failed on a front suspension bike was a weld failure, and that was corrected through, I had to do more diligence with my welding on that. But most of the time it's not happening with the front suspension. So it's like something about the full rigid is transferring forces in a very spiked way that really drive parts crazy. I mean, I'm not soft pedaling these. I'm trying to ride these bikes as hard as I can. I'm fat and old, but like I'm trying to ride the hell out of them. And that's where I'm finding failures. It's interesting. Stuff that might skate by in the suspended way, where it's softening up that blow. There's another thing. Let me pull this up here. I'm going to go to Millennium Falcon. So, like the most recent bikes, the Millennium Falcon and the Vega, if you look at the handlebars, here we go. So if we look at the handlebars, this strut here has a bit of flexing it can do before it gets to the bar. So not only do we have a squish fork, but we have flex in this strut that can happen. Now it's not going to be a lot, but it's going to be enough to take some edge off that then we're dissipating a bit of it and we're getting into bending of the titanium here. So I think that's another factor here, because if we look at, again, this is a freshy picture of the M2F2, where we see that this support strut that's causing the bar to rise up and is similar on the Supermarine Spitfire and similar on the TIE that I had, the TIE Fighter that I had I caught the brake in the carbon by the perch, and that's what stopped the use of the roll wrap pre-preg. It's being supported right there. So we've got a rigid fork and we've got this support way out at the edge. Of course, I'm thinking this is going to make it stronger, blah, blah, blah. But what that's doing is it's driving all of the flex into the bar right here. Now, it's obvious that there's a stress riser there. We knew that, right? There's some aesthetic stuff going on there. And there was supposed to be, here, let's look at a cutaway of the model. What I've done traditionally is put an insert on the inside. So I'm supporting the tube, there's some bond gap there, supporting the tube, and on the inside with a pretty steep or a shallow taper there to try to get rid of any residual stresses. Okay, but I'll tell you, the pain in the ass of this part is so bad. That's a really weird size to get in a tubular form in aluminum to put in there. Okay, so I have to machine it out of solid. And it's a pain in the butt. Like, I'm cutting 1-inch tube or 1-inch solid bar into this sliver of a pipe. And it's got to be like I don't know, close to 3.5 inches on each side and a little bit at the end or whatever like that there. But the problem's worse in that if we look at the images here, I was getting lazy. I thought that the titanium was doing so well that I didn't need this insert. In fact, on the Millennium Falcon, I actually don't even have an insert. And I've ridden this bike at DH parks. I've ridden the shit out of this bike. And I haven't had any problems with no insert, which, I mean, in retrospect, maybe I was trying to figure out new shit, right? But maybe I need one there. Maybe I got to do something. But certainly in this case, we end up with an assembly problem that I was taking shorts and I didn't get that past that stress riser there. And with the rigidity of the system, and also I'm using cheap ass titanium, you know, stuff from China or whatever. And people have mentioned that maybe my low quality titanium, and I'm using what you'd call a thin section of tube for that. I'm going to move up to a thicker tube. I'm going to be far more diligent about my my insert supports, and I'm going to blunt this stress riser here when I put this back together. I need to bore out this thing. You can see that I totally missed it, right? Like I was just getting sloppy and kind of, I don't know, cocky or something. There's the geometry of the setup. So it's like there's a reason why we're making bars this way. Used to be a nice looking bike. I guess I shouldn't ride these things. Okay, but let's look at the microscope images because I think that's where we start seeing really what's going on here. Well, let's go all the way to the start. Okay, cool. So we're going to look at the failure. So, okay, there we go. We're at the beginning. I noticed this is right next to the stress riser area. You can see the green right here from that where it's right close to it. And there's this like rectangular notch in the titanium tube. When I saw that, I was like, whoa, that's nuts. You can see the epoxy. Trying to get some good angles on it. Hold on, there we go. This is from the other side. You see the tube over here. And here's this notch. It kind of looks shiny, like it's been broken and was creaking around for a bit. See, we have shiny areas and we have, let's call them coarse areas. You know, we can expect that maybe the coarse areas broke right at the break time or weren't rubbing. Maybe shiny areas were rubbing. And there you can see the deformation. This is zoomed out a little more. You can see deformation right at that point because, of course, the pressure's going straight through here, so that's peeling out and all that. So that looks pretty gruesome, right? We're looking at a really tragic tube failure there. I guess I have to think about whether that was a result of the end of the failure or the initiation of the failure. There's another view. You can see that the green is right there, and there's that chunk. That's pretty cool, huh? You got to get a microscope for all this stuff. It's the only way to see stuff. But so I'm looking at that, and then I'm like, oh, I got to look at the other side too, even though this is like the glaring side where you look at the thing. And let's go over some more here. I'm going to post this stuff on my website. Look at that. That looks not gnarly right there. But then this is the other side. And what's crazy is we have this line in the tube. Here's the brake, and it's biasing toward the inside, but there's this line. Like, what the hell is that doing there in this chunk? Okay, we start focusing in on the line right there. Let me see if I can get us a little bit closer there. But there's that chunk. Like, I don't know. I'm wondering like what's going on with this. Was this the bend point and it was starting to fail around a circumference, and this was like breaking in here, and we saw that propagation or something, that it hit the edge. There's a good focused one. You can see that. But here's the failure. You would think it would fail here, but maybe it went up and got it around there. Anyway, yeah, so what I find is interesting, just the different ways that a full rigid bike reacts differently to loads than the squish front. And I have to rethink how I support this stuff so I can maybe get some more tube out here. We've got some tricky geometries we're trying to do and different types of stuff. We don't want the 3D print failure thing to happen again, because that was pretty sucky. That was a front suspended bike though. Oh yeah. But that one we kind of saw what was going on. That was too thin, and there was a hot spot in the design. Here, the 3D print's fine. The steel tubes are fine. The welds are fine. It was this part was not long enough. Didn't come out long enough. So we got to do that. So maybe I'll make these stiffer or thicker. I'm going to make the tube thicker and reduce that stress riser. But this was a fascinating one. You know, it's like, I mean, it's weird. I've done this enough, and I would say that I wouldn't want anybody that I know to experience a handlebar failure on a bike. It's one of the more horrific of the catastrophic failures. I guess a fork failure could be worse, but handlebar failure is right up there with the top of the tier, and there's nothing at all you can do. It is just game over, and you're just gonna ragdoll however you hit that ground, because everything is working outside. It's like when you fall back in a wheelie with clipless pedals, and there's no way to unclip. It's like with the braking handlebars, you're holding on and things break. So what do? You clutch tighter on the grips because you're trying to gain control. But the thing is, it's like there ain't shit there. You're going down. It's pretty bad. Let me see on my list of things I wanted to mention. I know I'm going on. Yeah, so we've got a little bit of redesign to do, but this is a new failure. We haven't broken titanium yet. Okay. Cool. I hope folks learned something. If they have some high quality titanium they want to sell, let me know. That's something I'm definitely shopping for right now in the 875 OD area, and we can talk about wall thicknesses when you contact me. Yeah, there we go. Thank you very much, people. Have a good day.